Alrighty, well, let's get started. My name is Gary Skolnick. I'm the CEO and founder of Neighborhood Sun, and I'm excited to have this presentation today. Many of you I'm sure, are aware of Neighborhood Sun and what we do, and you've heard from us, maybe myself or others on our team, about the community solar industry. You're going to hear from a very different perspective today. Samantha Wiebe is the uh, senior asset manager, senior asset management associate at Green Street Power Partners, which is one of our premier partners with Neighborhood Sun. And they are, as I talk about in my presentations, you have the companies that actually go out and build or buy or own the sites. And that is Green Street Power Partners. Without further ado, I will pass it over to you, Samantha. Oh, I'm sorry.
Awesome.
Wait, one more thing is if you do have questions while Samantha's speaking, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them in the order they're received.
Yeah, thanks for everyone for tuning in tonight. My name's Samantha Wiebe. I'm a part of Green Street Power Partners. And I think today we're just going to talk a little bit about what it's like to be a community solar owner and operator and how we work with companies like Neighborhood Sun and, build solar projects. So we can get started. Let's see. So Green Street Power Partners was founded back in 2014. We were actually originally a residential solar company and then kind of divested those assets and moved fully into the DG distributed generation space, focusing a lot in community solar. And GSPP is a little special because we do a little bit of everything in the solar industry. So we will develop projects or acquire them. We'll go out and get the financing for them. And then we will oversee the construction and then own and operate the projects. And so we specialize in finding that financing and have partners that we work with for those types of things. We are headquartered in Stamford, Connecticut, and have a legal team down in Florida. We have about 70 employees right now, I think. And last year, we got a majority investor with Diff Capital Partners, which was very exciting for us, and basically means that we can continue doing the work we want to do at an even faster pace over the next few years. So everyone was really excited about that. And then I guess just to talk a little bit about the megawatts that we own. So right now we have about 247 megawatts under management. Then we have 78 under construction. And then, in our pipeline over the next few years, the goal would be to install another gigawatt of solar into the ground. And hopefully you all will get to be a part of that. That's a little bit of an overview about GSPP. Then to talk a little bit more about our community solar portfolio, we are currently operating in 5 states right now. You can see them highlighted on the screen. I would say our bread and butter of community solar is New York. We have a majority of our projects there and are slowly building out into other states. Colorado was a recent entry for us. So was Maryland. And basically are following wherever state policy is favorable to develop and operate community solar projects. That's basically where we go. And so that's kind of why we're operating in these states right now. Some of these are some of the oldest community solar programs in the country. So yeah, that's a little bit of a look at our operational portfolio. And then I guess just to give a brief high-level overview of community solar in case people aren't familiar with it. The goal of community solar is to share in the benefits of solar power. And we try to make it as easy as possible for customers through community solar. And it's really awesome because you can bring people into sharing in the benefits who might normally not be able to participate in having solar on the roof, let's say, or something like that. So basically, you would sign up for a community solar project through a partner like Neighborhood Sun. Then once the project is operational, we start producing electricity that gets delivered into the grid through whatever your local utility is. Then that energy, gets sent around to homes and businesses, and then you receive credits from the generation from our solar farm. And those credits are based on, how much power we produce, and whatever rate has been ascribed to our solar generation. And then of those credits, you get to receive 10% of those as, bill savings. And then we receive 90 of those kind of as our like revenue for the project, basically. So we're kind of sharing in the revenue of the community solar projects. So that's kind of just a high level rundown. And then just wanted to highlight our partnership with Neighborhood Sun, which I'm sure Gary will also maybe talk a little bit about. We started working with Neighborhood Sun, I think a little bit over 1 year ago now, which was very exciting. We have already 44 megawatts of active projects with them and have even more megawatts of projects contracted to be turned on in the next couple of years. We're currently operating in 3 states with Neighborhood Sun: New York, Maryland, and Colorado. And all of our projects make up about 10,000 subscribers right now, which is pretty exciting. So that's a little bit about us and Neighborhood Sun. And then I think now I'll just go into a little bit about, I guess, the life cycle of a project, and how we get from maybe just a plot of land out in the country to a fully operating solar farm that is giving subscribers credits on their bills. So the first part would be project selection. So Green Street in the past has done a lot of what we would call greenfield development, which is basically when we are going out and sourcing projects from the start. So we've done that a bunch in our past, and we're kind of shifting more into acquiring projects from development partners that we have. So there are some companies out there that their sole purpose is to find projects, bring them up from nothing to, a certain point where they have the right permits and they have a lease, and other, items that make them basically ready to start construction. And so we're now focusing on kind of acquiring those types of projects from partners. We refer to those as requiring them at NTP, which would be notice to proceed. And that just means that they're ready to start construction. And then from there, we would take over the ownership of the assets and then oversee the construction and financing and all the other stuff. So now that we are focusing a little bit more on acquiring projects from development partners, it's super important to choose the right development partners. They're the ones who are making the initial relationships with the landowners and the towns that the projects are in. So it's really important that we have a partner that prioritizes those things and sets good groundwork for us to take over the project, since these are assets that will be on for 20, 30 years. So we're really entering into a long-term partnership with the towns that they're in, with the land or building owners that the projects are situated on. So, getting off on the right foot with the right development partner is super important to us. And I would say on average, it takes a project about 12 to 18 months to get from, someone knocking on your door being like, hey, maybe we could build a solar project on your farm, to being ready to be constructed. That's that NTP that I mentioned before. So usually, that takes about 12 to 18 months. And then going into what makes a good site or things that we are looking out for. One thing that's important is the existing electrical infrastructure that's around the farm, because if you have to do upgrades to the grid and things like that, that cost falls on the developer mostly. So that's something that we want to make sure we have situated well to set up a project. The other thing, obviously, is the right terrain and topography for a site. So we want a site that's pretty flat. I think usually we're looking for a slope of less than maybe 15%. And we also want pretty minimal tree canopy. We would like to avoid cutting down trees as much as we can, and we try and do that. So we're looking for sites that are not super covered with trees or are just open fields. That's a priority. And then one thing we would be looking out for is something like wetlands. That would be kind of a red flag for us. Wetlands and other certain like topography features would require special permits. And so that's just another layer of hoops that you would have to jump through, and other requirements that you would have to keep up with. So those are things we would want to keep in mind as well early on in the project. And then the other thing would just be parcel access. Ideally, the project would be near a road or would be easily accessible by a road. We usually build our own like access roads from main roads, but ideally, um, it's easy to get equipment and trucks in and out of there for project construction and the ongoing maintenance of the sites. So that's a little bit about the early stages of the project selection.
And
Then,
Sam, I have
yeah.
there's so I'm monitoring the questions, and if there's folks, if there's a question that's directly applicable to the point that Sam is making, I'll bring it up now. If
Mhm.
not, we'll discuss it at the end of the presentation. So there is one related to site selection.
Cool.
Do you do projects on agricultural land where you allow farmers to raise sheep and goats, support pollinators and beekeeping? So the whole voltaics kind of question.
That's a great question. So yes, we do projects on that type of land. I think the most common and basic would just be a farmer that uses part of their farmland still for crops and then wants to kind of maybe have like side money, or that part of the land isn't as usable anymore. But GSPP, we do a lot of sheep grazing on our sites. That's like a big priority for us. So that would be where we construct the solar project, and then we use sheep as our vegetation management. So we allow the sheep to go in and graze over the site. And that one is like a win-win for us. It's helpful for the surrounding area and the surrounding farmers. We try and work with local farmers, or even sometimes the landowners that own the property that the solar is on might have sheep that we use. And then also, sheep are like honestly less destructive than mowers can be sometimes. So it also helps with having less issues on site from accidents that can happen when mowing. And then an even added benefit for us is that sometimes if you use sheep grazing on your solar farm, you might be eligible for certain tax exemptions or certain like tax classifications that might ease your tax burden. So that's definitely something that we try and use on a lot of our sites. This year, we're using it on a bunch of our New York sites and our Colorado sites. And then, as far as pollinators go, we have one site in Colorado that actually has a pollinator habitat that was installed like around one of the fences, which was pretty cool. So that's something that we are working on maintaining. And then on top of that, we are usually trying to seed the sites with definitely whatever is native to the area, whatever type of native seeds are there, and have also done some pollinator seedings as well. So we are very excited about that, and we are looking into doing more full-blown agrivoltaics where you actually have like crops underneath your farm. We haven't dipped our toes into that yet, but it's something that's definitely on our radar, and we're looking to get into, I think, in the next few years. So that's a great question.
Well, that's awesome. That's really good stuff to hear. There is one more related question. How is a solar farm site actually secured?
How is it secured? You
Like, how do you
mean,
get control of it? I'm
oh, how do
assuming.
you get control of it? Okay, so typically, we lease the land that our solar farms are on. So we enter into a lease agreement with the landowner for let's say 30 years, where maybe we lease 25 acres out of their 80-acre parcel or something like that. And then we construct the solar farm there. We'll also build, if we need to, like a little site access driveway from whatever the main road is into that solar area. And then we would have a fence constructed around kind of the boundary of the array as well to keep it like a little bit separate from the larger parcel that the landowner has. So that's typically how we do it. We do own the land for a couple of our projects, but it's not typically what we do. So usually it's a lease agreement with certain like access easements as well sometimes.
Mhm. All right, great, thank you.
Cool. So, yeah, once we acquire a project from a developer at that NTP point, then we go into constructing the site. GSPP, we don't have an in-house construction team, so we outsource that to an EPC partner. EPC just stands for Engineering, Procurement, and Construction Partner. And they're the ones that actually build the site, and we are kind of overseeing that process with them. And also, we do a little bit of like in-house design for the projects with some of our in-house engineering members. And so the construction process usually takes 7 to 12 months, I would say. That timeline is dependent a lot on weather and where the site is located. So if it's a site up in northern New York near the border of Canada, there will be many months of the winter that we have to stop construction. So that's kind of something to take into consideration. But yeah, weather, location is a factor in that timeline, and also delivery timelines for equipment. So as far as equipment, Green Street usually orders modules and some other larger pieces of equipment in large batches that we then kind of allocate to projects as they progress through our pipeline. And we are also working on kind of a larger spare parts strategy to make sure that, as issues comes up and we need to fix things on the site, we have spare modules and other parts on hand so that we can reduce the wait time for getting things fixed and for parts of the site being down. So that's a big priority that we have on our hands this year. And another thing that we're working on is standardizing our equipment and design across our portfolio to kind of go back to that point of reducing downtime and standardizing what equipment we can have on hand and things like that. It just allows for a much smoother operations and maintenance phase of the project. So yeah, that's pretty much the construction part of it. EPCs are another big partner that is like a priority for us. We try and take a lot of care in the EPCs that we contract with, because those are the people that are kind of honestly dictating how long it takes for a site to be constructed. And, through working with partners and having long-term relationships, it just allows for a lot easier of a process. And then similarly, a lot of our EPCs might be more local to the area and have local, smaller service contractors that they use for different parts of the construction process. So it's just another good way to get the local community involved in our projects too. So that's another big point of ours is choosing the right EPC partners. And if there aren't any questions about construction, then I'll.
There is actually really quick, Sam.
Sorry, I
Yeah,
missed it.
you're fine. How do EPCs differ from the developer partners, I guess?
That's a good question. So I would say the developers are doing a lot of maybe the preliminary site design and maybe preliminary filings with the utilities and things like that. But the EPCs would be the ones that are actually more like boots on the ground doing the construction for the sites. And then also finishing up the site designs and drawings and things like that and interconnection with the utilities. So they're the ones that would actually be contracting out to find somebody to maybe do the grading on the site, and then they'll be acquiring certain pieces of equipment for us. Maybe like the racking would be an example, which you can kind of see in that bottom photo. All those poles and stuff, that's part of the racking for the system that the solar panels will be laying on. And then, yeah, they're the ones actually like putting things into the ground and interconnecting the whole site with the utility.
Great, thanks.
Which I guess might be one interesting tidbit too. Some of our sites are what we would call fixed tilt sites. So that means like the modules are laid on the racking at a fixed tilt. They don't move, they just sit there, and that's kind of at an optimal angle with the sun for whatever area the project is located in. But we also have some sites that are single axis tracker sites. So those are then like moving modules basically as the day goes on. And so they're trying to track the sun to get as much sunlight as they can throughout the day. And those are usually tracking east to west. So we have some sites that do that. So that would be like one design element that might differ project to project, and then require different equipment. But yeah, that's pretty much construction. Then next, to be pretty high level, there are two main sources of financing for solar projects: debt and equity. And we have a whole capital markets team in-house that is responsible for sourcing those financing from different banks and other like partners that we have, and kind of coming up with the payment models, for all those things. So the debt, there's usually a construction loan for the construction phase of the process. And then there is a, what we would call like a permanent loan for the lifetime of the project. And the way it was kind of explained to me is the permanent debt is like a mortgage attached to the cash flows of the project. And so there are like a lot of assumptions made at the beginning of the project about different like rates that we'll receive for the energy and, you know, operating costs and things like that that go into the sizing of our debt and our equity. So that's what the capital markets team is focused on. And then the equity part, the main source of equity would be what we call tax equity, which is referring to the investment tax credits, or ITC. That is given to us through government policy, which might be something that you guys have heard about because it was a big part of the Inflation Reduction Act that the Biden administration passed a couple of years ago, because in that act, they extended the ITC as 30% credit through the end of 2032. The ITC was set to lower each year and actually expire prior to that bill. And so that bill was really important for the solar industry, primarily because of this and a couple of other like added incentives that they did. And so basically the way the ITC works is that you can receive a tax credit, for the amount of money that you have invested into a solar project. So banks or other large companies, or even GSPP ourselves, we can reduce our tax liability by investing in the installation of solar projects. And then if it's an outside source like a bank or another large corporation, we can either transfer those credits to them, or they invest directly in the project, and can receive those tax credits for the first few years of the project. So that's like a big source of funding for the industry. And then the other type of equity would just be sponsor equity, which is basically just GSPP putting our own money into the projects, to make up for anything that we might not have gotten in the debt or tax equity from the ITC. So those are the main mechanisms for our project funding. And we usually group our projects into funds, basically. So we're usually trying to get our loans and our tax equity investments in groups of projects, maybe 4 projects at a time or something like that. So yeah, that's typically how it works. Then after funding, I'll talk about operational management a little bit before we go into why community solar. So I'm on the asset management team here at Green Street, and we're kind of the back office, or we would say like the last stop for the project in the life cycle. So most of the company is dedicated to finding new projects, getting the financing for them, developing them, overseeing the construction. And then the asset management team at Green Street is responsible for the projects once they turn on. So half the team is focused on commercial aspects. So that would be kind of the day-to-day business operations and management, also community solar management, which is why I work really closely with Neighborhood Sun. And then the other half of our team, we would kind of call the technical half. And they are the ones that are monitoring the projects 24/7 and working on optimizing project performance. So we have a team that does that. In addition to the in-house team monitoring the projects, we also work with third-party O&M partners. O&M stands for operations and maintenance. And they are also monitoring the performance of sites, and they're the ones that we actually send out to fix any issues on site. So they have crews that are more local to the areas that we have our projects in, and then they can be dispatched at almost any moment to go out and address any site issues that we have. So we work very closely with those partners as well for the lifetime of the project.
And
And then,
there's a question that actually very specifically relates to that issue. So
okay.
Eastern Colorado is notorious for severe hail. How will the panels stand to this type of potentially damaging weather? And I guess that's where the crews might come in.
Yeah, definitely. That is a great question. We have only one project in Eastern Colorado right now, and I don't know if I've heard of hail at that one yet, knock on wood. But I do know that we've been experiencing hail at some of our projects in Texas. So if it is the type of project that is that single access tracker that I was talking about, that we have the ability to move them, then we would want to be monitoring the weather reports, and ideally we would stow the panels at like an angle that we think would minimize the damage to the panels. But unfortunately, if it is a fixed tilt project, then we are at the mercy of the weather. So then usually after a big storm, we would kind of check out how the site is doing online with our monitoring, and if needed, send out someone to the site physically to assess the damage and see if any panels need to be fixed or replaced due to the hail. So yeah, extreme weather like hail happening in areas, flooding happening in areas that we might not have expected it is definitely a challenge for solar in the coming years, and something that I think the industry as a whole is going to have to adjust to. So that's a great point.
And similarly on that question, someone asked too, extreme heat, and does that impact panels? Just because we're seeing definitely some warmer summers more and more.
Yeah, that's another great point. I think I actually read a ticket from our O&M partner today about part of a site overheating. So yes, that is possible. I would say it's not super typical right now, but it does happen. I think also one thing that we keep in mind is the height of the grass at our sites, because especially if it happens to be a dry season, that would be a fire risk. So that's something that we're monitoring. So yes, sometimes panels overheat or parts of the system or equipment overheat, which would need to be addressed. And then, yeah, fire watching is definitely important, especially for sites in drier areas, maybe like California and other places like that. So yeah, definitely a lot of complexities and challenges in the next few years, probably with on-site maintenance. But that is why we have expert partners in our O&M partners to help us do that. And we also have parts of the GSPP team that make a priority to go out and visit the sites themselves. But we are not as local to the sites as a lot of our partners are. So we really rely on them and other local contractors to, help us fix any sites issues and things like that. And then, yeah, aside from just the technical monitoring and fixing of issues, there are a lot of kind of other day-to-day management business operations that go into each community solar project. So aside from working with Neighborhood Sun and our community solar subscribers for our community solar projects, there are other stakeholders involved, like our investors, who we have to do, regular reporting to and communications of any issues to. We also have, obligations to our landowners, and we try and make sure they are always up to date and happy with our sites. And then other examples would just be, like tax obligations and other requirements from local government jurisdictions and things like that. So, yeah, there's a lot that still goes into the day-to-day operations of a solar project. But yeah, I think I'll go back then to kind of just so here's a picture where you can see kind of some of the sheep in action at one of our New York sites. But yeah, I think we wanted to kind of address just a broad question of like why community solar in general. So from the developer's point of view, community solar has a lower barrier to entry than some other types of solar projects or other types of revenue for solar projects, because when that project is in that development stage, those early stages, you don't need a specific or direct off-taker that would be responsible for receiving all the power. We're able to interconnect to the larger grid and then, use community solar as a way to share in the benefits of that. So that kind of helps with the earlier development of projects, I think. And then in general, community solar has become pretty popular, and we're seeing more and more states adopt community solar programs and mandate utilities cooperate with community solar programs. So it's kind of just where the industry has been going as a whole, which is pretty exciting and cool to see. So we work pretty closely as an industry with advocacy groups and state legislatures and state governments to craft community solar programs and try and make it as beneficial to not just us, but also to community solar subscribers. So Green Street is involved in different advocacy groups and things like that to try and give input where we can on those matters. But I think the other cool reason for community solar is just impact. I think it's one of the best ways to make a meaningful impact, not just for climate change, but also for climate justice and equity. So the cool part about community solar is that it allows people and businesses who might not otherwise be able to participate in the clean energy transition to participate and receive those benefits. It allows us to include renters in the mix who obviously wouldn't be able to install panels for themselves. And otherwise, if you just have a building or a house or land that's not suitable to solar, this is a great way to get involved to support clean energy. And then the other cool part is that the industry as a whole is focusing a lot more on making sure we're incorporating low to moderate income individuals. So most state programs, I think right now, have some sort of, if not a mandate, then an extra incentive for developers to make sure they are reaching out to those members of the community and making sure that they receive the benefits of community solar and the discounts that it provides too. So that's like a really exciting trend for the industry as a whole. That's cool. And then I was able to pull a little bit of stats just about what maybe the power from one site in 1 year can offset. So one of our larger projects I looked up, the energy produced from that project in the first year alone would be able to power 1,000 homes entire energy usage for a year, which is pretty cool. And then another kind of conversion was that the energy from one of our projects for a whole year would be offsetting the emissions from 2,000 cars being on the road for a year. Those are kind of just obviously grand calculations, but it gives you a sense of the impact that community solar can have on climate change. So that is kind of just a fun tidbit. Oh, and I did want to mention another cool partner that we are working with on community solar is actually Meals on Wheels through Neighborhood Sun. So I think our Maryland project has Meals on Wheels as a community solar subscriber. So, you know, we're, like I said, we're just able to bring the benefits of solar in the clean energy transition to more people and more businesses and nonprofits, instead of just hearing about, oh, Meta's installing solar, Amazon's installing solar. So I think that's a really important part of it. But I think that was pretty much the presentation. So
All right.
thank you all
Well,
for joining.
yeah, thank you so much, Samantha. That was extremely informative. I've been in the clean energy industry for many years, and I learned a few things there. So I really appreciate that. That was a great presentation. Thank you. And Green Street Power Partners is just a fantastic partner for Neighborhood Sun and a fantastic part of the community. So we appreciate getting to work with you guys. All right, so Samantha, we have a lot of questions, so we might have to
Okay,
just zip through a few
cool.
in order to get to everybody. So some I might just jump into because it might be a little more for me. So does community solar only work in markets that use net metering?
Is community solar exclusive to markets that use net metering? Community solar is typically exclusive to markets that are deregulated, I would say. So that's partially why you don't see as much community solar programs in maybe the South, where those energy markets are not considered deregulated. I'm not sure if they have to work with net metering though. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a different form of net metering. It's called they call it virtual net metering.
mhm.
So even if a state doesn't have residential rooftop net metering, I suppose it could have virtual. I don't know. They probably all have the same.
Yeah, I
So,
think it would not have to be in a place with net metering because we're not really doing net metering. We are just injecting the power into the grid, and then spreading the credits that are from that. So I don't think that that is necessary.
okay. Um, and I see somebody on the call actually answered one of the questions. So thank you
Nice.
for that.
We have an informed audience. That's
Yeah.
cool.
All right. Someone says, I'm being solicited by another company offering a similar program like yours. Can one subscribe to more than one program like this at the same time? Depends on what state you're in.
Mhm.
In Colorado and Maryland, I believe you can in both of those states. I don't think New York lets you.
Yeah, New York, you cannot. So 1 meter can only be on one community solar project.
Yeah, but I would just say you don't want to have too much community solar because we've seen this happen, unfortunately, because you're not going to be able to monetize all those credits. In other words, if you have too many solar credits, you won't be able to benefit from. Okay, this question is there any benefit to me to invest in more than one solar farm if they are owned or managed by two different companies? Um,
We don't take investments in our project like that. Maybe we're talking about a community solar subscription, which would then kind of go back to the points that Gary was just mentioning.
that's
Um,
right. That's true. There is, although if anyone's interested in, there is a website, I think it's called Climatize, which allows you to make a small investment and then they invest in solar projects.
mm,
It's pretty cool. Yeah, Climate Ties is that one. How is, oh no, we did that. Can a solar farm power a data center?
yeah, Yeah, a solar farm can definitely power data centers. It's honestly a point that has been brought up at some of the like solar conferences that I've been to in the past year. Trying to couple those two things together from the beginning would be really cool. I think a data center could be either directly powered through other types of agreements with solar, or the easier route would just be being a community solar subscriber. They could definitely be one.
What are your plans for decommissioning solar panels at the end of their life?
That's a great question. So, since we've only been around since 2014, we have not decommissioned a site yet. We'll see if I'm around at Green Street in 20 plus years when we will be. But usually, part of the development process is having some sort of decommissioning assurance, usually in the form of a decommissioning bond. So that's money that we're kind of squaring away for that purpose, to remove the system, bring the land back to, in general, kind of the state that it was in before the solar was there. And then I know there are a lot of cool conversations going on in the industry about recycling equipment and things like that. It's just not something that's been super relevant to us yet, but will be eventually.
All righty. Do you use recycled electric car batteries for storage of excess energy?
We personally do not have any storage systems with our solar yet, but that's also a goal of ours over the next few years. And we've brought on some battery storage experts to the team in the past few months, to help us figure that part of the equation out. But that would definitely be a goal of ours, I think.
All right. Any research being done into maybe doing networked rooftop solar in neighborhoods or urban areas? Sounds like an
Network.
interesting idea.
I'm not sure what they mean by networks.
I guess having, like, let's say 100 rooftop systems.
Oh,
I
all
don't know if they
connected.
mean like literally network, but like all part of one community solar project.
That would be cool. We do have kind of an instance where some of our projects in New York City, it's one project to the utility. There's one point of interconnection where the energy goes into the grid, but the building has different roofs, or the building complex has different roofs, and those are all connected into one point that feeds into the utility. So
Well, that's
maybe
really
on a
cool.
smaller scale that exists. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. All right, I'm going to summarize this question a little bit. The person is basically asking if you're aware of a different kind of community solar model where they could buy panels and like basically be a shareholder in the project along with other homeowners doing the same.
I do think there are organizations out there that are working on community owned community solar projects. We don't have any right now at Green Street, but I have seen that for sure. I'm not sure how much it's taken off, but I do think that exists in certain areas.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, especially with the provision in the IRA that allows nonprofits to take the tax credit. Um,
Hmm.
so I think local community organizations might want to get involved. All right, here's one for me. Historically, how long, or maybe you'll answer it for all your projects, but how long does it take for a community solar project to reach 50% subscription and 100%?
You guys are
Well,
the experts,
yeah,
so.
like everything else, it depends. There are some areas like Colorado where people are really excited about solar, and there's a lot of people who can't get rooftop solar. So, I would say that it's probably about 3 to 6 months to fully subscribe it. So like 3 months, 50%, another three. Then you
Mhm.
have some areas, uh, I won't name names. Well, okay, like in parts of, I will name names. Uh, our home state, Maryland, in the western part of Maryland, there's very little population. The people there are not so pro solar. So that would take longer. That would be more like a 6 months to a year kind of situation. And it also depends on how good of the offer is. So, some projects it's a 10% discount, sometimes it's 15, or it could be 5. So that
Mhm.
also. Um, all right, this is for you, Samantha. What part of the process do you have to interact, negotiate with the utility company managing the grid that the solar site connects to?
Yeah, so I would say that would start in the development phase of the project. So, if we are acquiring the project from a developer at NTP, like right before it's ready to interconnect or to start construction, then they would have already been working with the utility because you have to apply for interconnection with the utilities where they're taking a look at your proposed plans. They're trying to see, okay, can this part of the grid handle that? What equipment on our end, the utilities end, would they need to install to make the system work? So those are all things that kind of get ironed out in that like development phase. And then ultimately, it is the utility that gives you the sign off to turn on and start producing energy. So they're involved in the process for a while from a design and engineering standpoint. And then in the case of community solar too, they're in a lot of states involved in the project for the life cycle because they are the ones that are putting together the credit data and things like that that we rely on. So yeah, they are a major stakeholder in all of our projects.
All right. What is replacement time for solar panels? I'm not sure if they're looking for how long do they last or how long does it take to replace one?
I think. Ooh, what is the lifespan for? I think modules ideally or panels would last. It might be 25 years. It's either 10 or 25 years. I'm forgetting which piece of equipment that is. But then how long it takes to replace, let's say if a panel breaks or we need to replace it, really depends on one, that spare parts strategy that I was kind of mentioning, and then just the availability, and hopefully you have a pretty like standard panel on your project that there's a lot of supply for out there. We actually ran into a situation with some of our smaller Massachusetts projects where the panels that we installed, the manufacturer went out of business. These are from like a few years ago. So then we had to kind of scour the internet to grab as many spares as we could, and are also working on maybe switching out those panels for the rest of the lifetime of the project.
All right. We are getting close to the end, and I see there's still a ton of questions. This is incredible. I think we've discovered something here. People are really
So,
curious about the solar development process and all things solar. So we might have to do another one. If
yeah,
we
we'd love
don't,
to see it.
yeah, if we don't get to your question, I suppose we'll have to give you guys a way to contact us. So
Mhm.
I'll leave a couple minutes for that at the end. All right, just maybe a couple bullet points. What are the biggest pushback points or challenges you have in rolling out a new project?
The biggest challenges we have, I think the industry as a whole would probably say utility interconnection. It's a long process, which makes sense. But I think we're trying to focus on, as an industry, ways to speed that up. So I think that's a big bottleneck for the industry since there are so many companies and people trying to invest in it. So I would say that's a major one.
All right. At the end of the life, why can't you just replace the old panels with new ones and continue with the solar farm?
That's a good question. I think my first answer would be just because of the length of the contracts that we have. I think most community solar contracts with the utilities maybe only last 25 or 30 years. Same thing with our leases, which are kind of like modeled after how long the revenue will last. So I don't know if that will change eventually, but yeah, that's my gut answer.
Do you have any projects ongoing or planned that feed into microgrids?
We do not at Green Street. We do not.
Okay. As part of the decommissioning plan, do you need to have a set plan for recycling or reusing the panels elsewhere?
That's a good question. I don't know. It might depend on the jurisdiction and the requirements of the town or entity that's giving you all the permits. I don't know if any of ours do right now. Yeah, I'm not sure.
All right, now I see a lot of these questions are getting answered, which is great. Someone said we should spend more on advertisement. People aren't excited enough. Okay, that's true.
I agree. I think
Yeah,
community solar is like a real. It's like a sleeper product.
yeah.
It's free to sign up to get a discount. I just think not as many people know about it. So everyone on the call, it's your responsibility to spread the word with us.
Amen to that. Do you have any new solar farms being considered for development in Maryland?
We do actually. We are assessing a few portfolios of Maryland projects right now. So hopefully more will be coming online soon.
Right. Oh, I think I'm okay. Last one. Can a community solar array connect to the grid at any utility pole, or does it have to be adjacent to a substation or high voltage wires?
I don't think it has to be adjacent to a substation since a lot of our projects are kind of out in rural areas. So I think that we can connect to most utility poles or areas, and that would be part of the work that we do on designing the projects with the utility. Beforehand, they have a big say in whether we would be doing overhead lines or going underground for lines and how many poles we would need and things like that.
Fantastic. All right, so um, here's our little commercial. I assumed everybody knew who Neighborhood Sun was, but just in case you don't, we are the company that works with companies like Green Street to sign up customers for community solar projects and then to manage the customers. I found that the company were based in Maryland, and we are excited to be in 7 states, including Colorado, New Jersey, New York. We saw people from there tonight. And I want to let you know we are a people-powered business, and you can own a piece of the sun through our current crowdfunding raise. It's on WeFunder, so anybody can participate. You don't have to be a high net worth individual, and the investments start at just $250. The information there is wefunder.com/neighborhoodsun. And actually, yeah, I think it's just /neighborhoodsun. So that's us. And why don't we share our contact information for Neighborhood Sun? You can email me. I'll put it in the chat. So if there's any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask, or we didn't answer, you know, enough, I guess, or whatever you wanted, you can just follow up with me and maybe Samantha. I don't know if you want to, or I could pass it on to you as well.
Yeah, I would say for us, we have an info@gspp.com email address. I'll put in the chat where we can answer questions
Okay,
or
great.
direct your questions.
All right. Thank you all for the amazing questions, and thank you so much, Samantha. And we'll have to have a sequel sometime.
Yeah, sounds like it. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Night, everyone.